handle the session over to our first speaker, Ochre Mordecai. Please, Mordecai, over to you. Thank you, everyone. And please feel free to introduce yourself on the chat. You're welcome, Ochre. Please feel free to introduce yourself on the chat. Tell us where you're joining us from. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Tabitha, for the extensive introduction that
You're welcome, Ochre.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Depending on your location, actually. We want to welcome you once again and thank you for joining us today. Now, like you already know, my name is Ochi. I'm from Digitank. I'm reporting from Ghana, actually. Tabitha is from Lagos. I'm from Ghana. Now, today we want to talk about modernizing legacy applications. How are you going to modernize these systems that seem old? They seem archaic. They seem, sorry to say, out of stock in the current market. Now, we bear witness to the fact that these applications are gradually phasing out. They're actually moving out, looking at the trends and the current trends of updates and then system processes that are coming in. You realize that these applications are beginning to go out of date. And so over the next 45 minutes, my colleagues and I are going to show you how organizations like yours are actually making use of cutting edge technology, of up-to-date technology to actually modernize their systems in a matter of weeks instead of years. Now, I am hopeful that by the end of this webinar, you should be able to understand the clear path forward. Now, there's one thing I usually say. In the traditional setting of doing things, you realize that modernization or bringing your systems up to speed currently tends to fail. About 70% of them fail. Now, it is not a coincidence that all this is happening. And it is also not a coincidence that most of them actually fail, or it's not a coincidence why most people are not so fancied about the whole idea of modernization. Now, the first challenge that we usually see is the human bottleneck. Let's take, for instance, the old way of sending letters. Let's put it that way. Back then, when you want to send a letter, you have to take it to the post mail, and it has to be mailed. And there's even a tendency of the person that you are sending it to not even receiving it. And you know the steps that you have to go through and all that. Now, in today's era, you don't need a postman or a post mail to send a letter. You could do that over email. You could do that over most productive tools that we have on the market today. You could even do that over WhatsApp. So you realize that things have shifted from human bottleneck. The postman's bicycle could probably get spot on the road. He could encounter a few challenges. The postman will actually determine when the letter gets to whoever you want to send the letter to. Now, there's a bottleneck of human in it. For example, let's come to our industry. Now, you want to roll out a project or a modernization system. Now, you realize that you need some people to be present. You need a team of consultants. You probably need a database guy. You probably need an app developer. Now, the sad thing about it is that when the developer cannot start developing the app, and then when these two guys are not done, you realize that the QA team would also have to wait. So there's that human bottleneck where things are done in a sequence. This has to finish before another comes in. There's communication breakdown between teams. Knowledge is always in silos and all that. And there's that complexity overwhelm where you have systems that are dependent on certain things that nobody remembers. Business rules that usually exist in only one person's head. And systems that are probably running for decades. And you have just a few people or even retired people who know how to maneuver their way around these systems. And this becomes a very big challenge for organizations today. Now, while all this is going on, you ask yourself, where does this put my business? You realize that your business is now at a risk of breaking down, in the sense that your customers are not going to wait for you to rectify all the internal challenges you are facing before you get back to them. So you realize that all this becomes a challenge. Now, with all this becoming a challenge, it also brings about certain hidden costs that you might probably have in your environment. I usually call them hidden costs because they are not costs that will make their way onto your budget sheet. However, they are really draining you. Now, the first thing that I would want you to understand is that these applications that we talk about, these sorry to say, old way of doing things, are very critical to our day-to-day running of our businesses. You can tell that they are actually important to us. However, they are very expensive to maintain, and they are very, very slow. Very, very slow in the sense that, like I said, it's sequential. So you have to wait for someone to finish something before something starts. Now, for the hidden cost base, there's that money drain. Money drain in the sense that, let's talk about licensing a bit. For those of us in the IT department, we usually deal with licensing. Now, these licenses actually comes from a vendor. We are in an environment where once you get stuck with a vendor, your hands are tied. So whatever cost the vendor is giving you for the license, that's what you're going to pay. Now, these are hidden because they are consuming your IT budgets gradually. For example, let's take a VM Ware infrastructure, or let's say the place where your servers are. Now, these places that host your service, or the machines that you work with, these places that host them are actually being paid for. You need a license to run them. So, for example, if you're running a VMware infrastructure, which is one of the places where you host your systems or your machines, let me put it that way, you realize that these licenses costs have jumped from about 300% to about 600%. So let's say you were doing about $10,000 a year, you should be expecting to do about $60,000 or more. Now, for those of us who are running on Windows Server 2016, for the IT heads, we would understand after 2027, you are going to be paying hundreds or thousands of dollars per service just for security patches in order to meet up with various compliance audits. For the finance guys on the call, I don't know how the regulatory standard is in your location, but I know for Ghana, if you don't meet the requirements, you realize that Bank of Ghana is actually going to have issues with you, and you have to be up to speed with that. So you realize that all these things are going to cost you so much, and these are hidden costs that are eating into our IT budget. So you go to the CFO or the CEOs on the call. When the IT guys come to you like that, sometimes it's not their fault. Sometimes it's because of the systems on which we are running, and these are very costly and very, very cumbersome. So then you realize that it becomes a daily pain point for all of us. It becomes a challenge for all of us. If these are things you could resonate with, I think I've dropped a poll. My colleague has dropped a poll on the chat. You can feel through. Let's get interactive in the comment area. Let's get to understand what is happening. If it's something you can really relate to, you let us know in the comment section. Now, like I was saying, there are daily pain points that we have. These are things that keep us up at night. There are things that we can't sleep over. Typical example is security and compliance nightmares. Security and compliance nightmares of dealing with those unpatched vulnerabilities that I mentioned earlier on in your systems. And they can't be updated because probably the vendor has stopped supporting them. You are running on a server, Windows Server 2012, and you can tell that Microsoft has stopped providing support for such service. So there's always that vulnerability in your system, and you don't want to get unexpected surprises here and there. There's also the talent shortage. Now the talent shortage crisis is getting worse by the period. For example, let's say you run a COBOL system, or let's say a classic ERP system. Now, the engineers around these classic ERP systems are probably, the average age will be around 55 years old today. They are either retiring or they are leaving. So when there's an emergency support, you'd have to pay more to get them on board, or you even have to fly someone all the way in. So you realize that the people you are working with currently have no idea about the system they are using. So once there is a challenge, you are not able to really work with. And then there's the operational reality where unexpected systems usually crash. There's usually the crash in the system where you have to fix it immediately. Because you have to fix it immediately, the 55-year-old man doesn't really have the energy to be moving up and down and all that. And the young guy in your organization doesn't have an idea about what the whole thing is. So having created this picture to you, you ask yourself, what is the way forward? How then do I do this? Is there a solution for me? And I've come preaching the good news that AWS has a solution for you. What if I told you that there was an amazing tool that AWS comes on board with? And that is AWS Transform, for the reason we are on the call or we are on this webinar today. AWS Transform is simply about helping your business move from the old manual way of working to a more faster, a more smarter, and a more cloud-based system. So it helps you to work faster, helps you to work cheaper, it helps you to store and protect your data better, and you're able to use modern tools like AI and analytics to grow. So you realize that today's era, if you are not using AI, I'm sorry for you, but you have to get up to speed with whatever is happening. But in today's era, you realize that AI and analytics have huge additions to your arsenal if you have to go that way. So then you want to ask yourself, how is AWS Transform coming in to help me? You remember I told you about this sequential way of doing things, or let's even use the post office scenario. You need a postman to be able to take the thing to the letter to your recipient. The postman chooses when to send it. He chooses various dependencies that your letter will be sent out, and then he chooses how to deliver the letter. So you realize that it's a huge challenge for you that you don't really have control over. Your own letter is being controlled by someone. In the same way, certain business processes that you have will depend on certain things. Now, I'm going to walk you through how this AWS Transform agent works, the various capabilities it has, and then my colleague will come in and then show you real life or real time how the thing is actually working. Now, let's say, for example, you are able to direct your AI agent to your legacy applications. So you're able to tell your postman to directly pick the letter from this spot. And while he's picking the letter from this spot, there is also another AI agent, which is part of the AWS Transform agent, that is literally working on putting your letter in the bag. There's also one that is simultaneously working, transporting your letter. So you realize that everything is done simultaneously. One is not dependent on any. So you don't have to wait for this. This person doesn't have to wait for this person and all that. So you're able to point the AI agents to your legacy systems or your legacy applications, whether they are in GitHub or they are on premise or no matter where your source code lives, the agent is able to connect securely and then start their work. Now, the interesting thing about this whole thing is that in a matter of 6 to 8 weeks, you're able to get your modernization done through AWS Transform. The traditional way of modernizing applications or systems will take you probably a year, maximum 3-5 years to modernize. And it's a big challenge because your customers can't wait for a whole year to get things done. Now, the good thing about it is that there is a unified web experience that you get. So for those of us who don't really like the whole blue, yellow, red lines of code and everything, there is a web experience that comes alongside it, and you are able to understand what is happening, who is doing what at this point in time, and it's easy to really maneuver. And then there's also the ID experience for the developers. So you realize that these people for the developers, they are able to actually work with it better. So, like I said, there is a web experience and then there is a IDE experience. Now, I'm going to show you my last point, and then my colleague will step in to show you what is actually happening. Now, these are AWS transformation capabilities that you can get. For example, you use a .NET framework application on Windows. Now, what AWS Transform is able to do for you is that it's able to move your .NET framework from its current state to a Linux-free cross-platform .NET application. What this means is that you are able to run your application or your systems anywhere on Windows, Linux, containers, cloud, wherever you want it. For example, you have a VMware workload on-premise that it's actually taking a lot of time, a lot of money. It's also slow to work around and everything. You realize that AWS Transform is also able to move it from its current state and gives you a cost-effective Amazon EC2 instance. Emphasis on the cost-effective EC2 instances. So you realize that you are paying huge sums of money just to buy licensing for the VMware workloads. And it becomes a challenge for you. Because it's becoming a challenge for you, we are giving you EC2 instances that you can freely work with. They are scalable in their own nature and all that. For those of us who work with applications, probably using the old versions of Java, you can get the version 17 and everything. So when you pay attention to everything we are talking about, we are preaching freedom. Freedom with your workload, freedom in your own environment. You don't have your hands tied. At the same time, having flexible agents that are working for you simultaneously. You are getting rid of sequential way of doing things and everything. So once your application is modernized, you are not trapped with a single vendor anymore. Your applications are able to run on AWS, on any cloud platform, or even back on-prem when you want to do the hybrid system. So once your vendors are misbehaving, you can actually leave, literally, you can literally leave and then go where you are safe. It's not just about moving to the cloud, but it's about making your applications portable so that you have real life choices to be able to work with. Now, my colleague is going to show you how all this works. Let's get interactive in the comment section. If you have any questions, you can pose it there. We are willing to answer, and the polls are still going on. We would appreciate if you can come in and then let us know if you're following whatever we are discussing, and then we'll get you sorted. So at this juncture, I'll hand over to my colleague Emmanuel. He's going to take us through to show us how it transform works in real life. Emmanuel, if you're ready, over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mordecai, for that very fascinating session. So my name is Emmanuel Osa, and I am a business application specialist with Digitank, and I will be taking us through the demo session for the webinar. So what I will be doing is just right before I kick in, I will like to lay emphasis or provide context that for the demo, or for the demo with regards to the webinar session, I will try my best to see how I touch on a triage of presence that we might possibly have in our attendance. It's possible that we might have developers on the call. It's also possible that we might have CTOs, CEOs, CISOs, and we might also have persons who do not fall in this category. So I'll try to see how I will simplify things. So my colleague made mention of the fact that he established the fact that we're looking at a traditional way for which and for how things are being done, and a much more recent conventional way for how these traditional things are being done. You get? So we have it's possible that we have monolithic. When I say monolithic, I would like to provide clarity to what monolithic means. Monolithic simply means an application that is all packed in together. It might have a database, it might have a user interface, it might also have business processes all looped in together. They are all locked in together. Yeah, this is your one monolithic application. And the problems that comes with the utilization of a monolithic application is that you have your developers who might want to make changes, apply new features to this existing monolithic or one looped or coupled in application. The problem with that is that you try to add a new feature to this existing application of yours in order to enhance or to provide your customers a better user interface or a better experience. And then the trouble that comes with that is that it might break down the entirety of your code. And then for the CTOs, for the CISOs, the problem that also comes with trying to do modernization is that you do not want to experience a business downtime or a breakdown. So there's a whole loop in, or there's a whole lock-in in certain cases. Maybe you have a vendor lock-in where you are strictly dependent on the utilization of a Windows environment. There are certain situations where you are simply locked in with the utilization of a VM Ware environment, and then there are also situations where you are just locked in with the utilization of an IBM mainframe. You are not provided the flexibility of going cross-platform. You are not provided the flexibility of moving to a cloud environment because you want to cut down cost, or you also want to innovate. You want to improvise on what you have. So you're just locked in with a high cost in licensing. You're just locked in with the environment where you are, and then you are pretty much exposed to security breaches, a lack of updates to the patches that you currently do have. So these are some of the challenges or problems that comes with simply remaining in a monolithic legacy or traditional environment. So for your developers, in trying to do modernization, where many a times it's a gamble, in trying to do modernization, what simply happens is that they get your old traditional or your old codes, and then they do some analysis of it. When they have done an analysis of your existing source code, they try to identify incompatibilities. All of these are simply being done manually. So having identified incompatibilities, they apply all the modifications that need be applied to your existing code. Haven't done that, they try to do a verification and then a deploy, and then in trying to do the deploy and the verification of it, or a unit test of it, what can simply happen is that it might fail, and then they have to go back in trying to rectify whatever problems it is that they might have experienced. So this comes with sometimes a breakdown because you're just working in one environment and you simply want to get this thing right. You do not want to get it wrong, because you have customers who are currently simply making use of your own environment. So this is the case, or this is the point where AWS Transform comes into play. What AWS Transform does is that what AWS Transform is, and then what AWS Transform does is AWS Transform is an agentic AI that takes away the manual processes that your current developers who are analyzing your existing source code are simply doing. What it simply does is it simply automates everything that you currently have. So as you can see on the screen on your current slide as of this very moment, this is the typical workflow for what the AWS Transform, what it simply do. So what it simply does is this: you point your AWS Transform or the agentic AI to where the source code is that you need transformed into a more modern tool. The simple reason why, just for emphasis, the simple reason why you're trying to do modernization is that you're trying to accommodate for scalability. You're trying to accommodate for the innovation or for the addition of new features. You're trying to cut down on cost. You're trying to move away from the whole experience of having to deal with a vendor lock-in. You get, so at this very point, your AWS Transform points to where your source code is seated. It could be seated in the cloud. I mean, it could be seated in your GitHub repo. It could be seated in the cloud inside the AWS S3 bucket or a storage facility where your source code can be seated. It does the whole analyzing of the code, finds incompatibilities within your source code that do not relate to what you want, that do not relate with what you want in your cross-platform or in your new modernized application. So having done the whole analysis and then it finds the whole incompatibilities, it's now going to be making use of logics that have been built into these agents. These logics are 2 decades of AWS's experience in trying to carry out modernization. So what these agentic AI simply do is that it identifies incompatibilities, and then when it identifies these incompatibilities, it simply knows what it's supposed to leave, what it's supposed to change, and then what it's supposed to simply throw away. So like I said, these are 2 decades of experiences and knowledge that has been trained and then put into this agentic AI in order to simply move away from the manual process of trying to modernize your existing application. So it simply applies the modifications, and then when it applies the modification, it does a unit test verification of what you currently have. If it finds any issue, it goes back in a loop in trying to fix that issue. Having fixed that issue, it does a whole deployment cross-platform to wherever environment that you want. So rather than just simply being locked in on-prem, or simply remaining locked in on a server, or simply remaining locked in the utilization of a Windows environment, you can simply move away from all of that to maybe a new environment. It could simply be Linux. It could also simply be to the cloud environment. So having said that, the typical process and way for which you begin to make use of the AWS Transform is that you need an AWS environment. And this is the typical look of how the AWS environment looks like. I'd like to draw your attention. If you want, you can drop any question within the chat. We have experts who will attend to that. And if you have any worries, you can simply also drop that also in the chat, and then we'll try to see how we attend to that. So like I made mention of, the typical process and way for which you gain access to the AWS Transform is that you need an AWS account. And in the AWS account, there's a search area where all the 250 plus services that are existing within AWS are available in. So you put in the name and then you search that, and then it pops up this, and then you click on the AWS Transform. The moment you do that, you are going to be provided with 2 regions. These are currently the 2 regions where AWS Transform works in. We have the Northern Virginia, and then we have the Frankfurt region. So transformation basically happens in the Northern Virginia and then in the Frankfurt region. When transformation do happen in this area, you can simply do your deployment of your transform code to any region of your choice. You get, and one other thing that I'd like to draw to your attention is that you still maintain control and then right of your source code while it's in the AWS environment. And then also this transformation also happens in an isolated environment, devoid of access to anyone. Just simply the agentic AI is the one that has access to your source code. Having done that, you're also going to have to enable the AWS Transform. You click on this gentle nice area over here to enable the AWS Transform. And then there are some prerequisites that needs to be set up before you begin to make use of the AWS Transform. And one of them is that you need to have users who will be making use of the AWS Transform. So it's possible that you might have an identity provider. Setting up the identity provider can be quite complex, but you can also go through that route, or you can simply go through the route of setting up a user on the AWS environment. This is the user for whom authentication will be provided for in order for the user to make use of the AWS Transform. So at this very area over here, you're going to provide in the identity center on AWS a user who will be making use of the AWS transformation agent. And then at this very point, you will be provided with a default encryption key that will encrypt both your data at rest and then your data in transit. So if you do not want to make use of the default encryption key that is being provided by AWS, you can also bring your own encryption key in order to encrypt both data that is in transit and then that is at rest. And then finally, we will now be provided with this area. We have two experiences. So like my colleague previously made mention of, we have two experiences. We have an experience that has to do with an IDE, that is an integrated development environment like your Visual Studio Code. And then we also have a web application URL. So in cases where you have just a particular transformation code that needs to be worked on, what you do is that you make use of the IDE experience in order to continue, or in order for you to do your transformation. Whereas if you have lots of codes, if you have lots of repositories, if you have lots of projects that needs to be worked on, what you simply do is that you make use of the web URL, which can be bookmarked within your browser area. And for this demo experience that we will be looking at, we'll be making use of the web URL. So what I'll be doing at this very point is that I will be sharing my screen, and then I'll be going into my browser to carry on with the demonstration for this. So with just a show of the thumbs up, you can simply help me to know that you can see my screen as of this very moment. And just for emphasis sake, I'd like to remind you that you can drop your questions. If you have any question along the line, you can drop it within the chat area. So, like I made mention of, for your legacy application, it could be an ERP application. It could be an ERP application. It could be also, like I made mention of, a monolithic application. A monolithic application, like I made mention of, is simply just one application that has everything coupled in together. You are not even really sure, like my colleague made mention of, some of the loopholes that comes to the utilization of a legacy application is that you have developers who have come and then who have gone. You have layers of codes that you are not even really aware of. You are not really aware of the business logics. You are not really aware. You are not even really in the light of the functions that are currently running. So you are scared of carrying out any form of modernization. So we are just locked in with the whole utilization of the monolithic applications that you have over there. And you are not also provided the private privilege of going modern in using current DevOps tools or current IT practices that will allow you room for innovation and then better competitiveness or quickness to go to the market. So at this very point over here, what you are simply looking at over here is a simple sample code that we will be using as a case illustration for the AWS transformation agent. This is where the code currently is resided within a GitHub repository. And then this area over here is my AWS console, where I have two servers that are currently running. I have a Windows server that is currently holding an old legacy code base for a web application. And for this code base that is seated within this Windows environment or Windows server, it is just simply locked in. It does not work cross-platform. So at this very point, the user cannot be able to make use of maybe a Linux environment. He's simply stuck with the utilization. He's simply stuck with the utilization of a Windows environment, and then he's simply stuck with the whole issue that comes with licensing. So if there's an increase in licensing, he has to pay that money. But also, aside from that, the resources that he's also going to be making use of. We also have, let's say, for this current environment and then for the application that is running over here, you have the whole issue of the volume size for this. The volume size for this is pretty huge. So this user or this customer in this scenario is dealing with a high cost at this very point that comes with the server resources, the server size, and also the speed at which the application is also running with, and then the cost that comes with the deployment of all of this. And then on the other hand, what you're seeing over here is still this same application that you see over here that has been transformed. You get that has been transformed, and this transformed application is seated cross-platform within a Linux environment. And you can see over here the instance type. The instance type is just trying to show you the size for what the server is currently looking at. So this is much more the same application that is running within another cross-platform environment. But at this very point, this over here within the Windows environment is quite huge, whereas what you see in the Linux environment is quite very small. And also for the storage, it's quite reduced. So what you see over here is that you have a 75 gigabytes in terms of volume, whereas what you see over here is a reduced volume size. So you see, or you notice a reduction, a 75% reduction in terms of cost. You get, so rather than sticking to using the Windows environment, you are allowed the flexibility or the room of having options of trying to move away from a Windows environment to a Linux own environment. So in order to make use of the AWS transformation, like I made mention of, we will need a user. And for this, I've already created a user within the AWS Identity Center. And this is the user termed transform. And also, we are also going to need a prerequisite. The other prerequisite that we also are going to be needing is an AWS connector. The connector allows the AWS transformation agent to be able to connect to where our source code is seated, which is within our AWS, which is within our GitHub repository. And then this is the ARN, that is more also like an ID for this connector that you see over here. And then likewise, like I made mention of, we have two URLs. So for the URL, like I made mention of, that we would be making use of, the URL that we will be making use of is the web URL. So this web URL is simply what will allow us to gain access to the AWS transform or transformation agent. So I already have that opened. So when you come to where the AWS transformation agent is, I'll try to touch on diverse areas or a triage of persons, like I made mention of. We have customers, we have the customer experience, we have developers' own experiences and problems that they deal with, and we also have organizational heads' issues or challenges that they also get to deal with. So at this very point, we have our monolithic code application. We do not even really understand what documentations exist. We do not really know what the dependencies are with these applications. We do not really know all the languages that cut across what we currently do have. We are simply lost because we have developers who have come, and then we also have developers who have gone or who have left our organization. So we are just simply stuck with one developer who might be who has all the tribal knowledge in his head. So we can't let that person go. And even if someday that person comes and then he says he's going, you're left with that fear of what to do. You get, so we are all trying to see how we will try to deal with all of these problems and all of these experiences and challenges that comes with all of that. So at this very point, when you come to the AWS Transform environment, you are provided with a workstation, or you have to create a workstation. The workstation is more or so like a container where all your jobs are going to be carried out or performed. So you come to this area. For mine, I named it a legacy.NET framework demo. And before I forget, the AWS Transform works on mainframes, it works on VMware, it also works on .NET applications and then on Java applications. So if you have ERP applications or you have business solutions that have been built with this language, with these languages, just know that this is the solution to work on that, so that you're able to move away from the whole vendor lock-in, to cut down on cost and to provide you with the experiences of trying new things. So we have this area over here, which is a workstation, and then we have this area over here, which is the job for which I am going to be working on. So for this very area for this very demo experience, we'll be working with a .NET. And then also, we also have the whole bottleneck that comes with collaboration between and then within teams. At this very point, you might have the stakeholders who are involved with carrying out your traditional modernization. So what you simply do is, rather than having them to figure out how to work traditionally, we have a central dashboard area where you send out invites to perhaps maybe the DevOps engineers, perhaps maybe the developers, and then maybe you might have maybe a QA team. You send out the invites to them. You create user accounts for them within the identity center, and then you send out invites to them, and then you pull them over here so that they can collaborate. They can collaborate between and then within themselves. So we have at this very area over here the region for where transformation is going to be done or carried out. And for mine, it is going to be carried out within the Northern Virginia, that is the US East 1. So having said that, you click on the job over here, which brings you down to this very area over here. So this is what the typical look of what the AWS Transform looks like. And usually before you begin, the AWS Transform would want to understand, would want to learn who you are, and then what you're trying to do in terms of the job transformation or in terms of the modernization for which you are trying to carry out. So it will try to understand or request from you to tell it if it's a .NET or if it's a VM Ware or if it's a mainframe modernization that you are trying to do. In my own case, what I'm trying to do transformation for is for a legacy or an ERP, for a web application .NET application that I'm trying to transform to a more modern tool. So I'm trying to move away from a .4.8 to a .NET 8 version application, just so that I can have a very simple user experience, just so that I can cut down cost, just so that I can get a very friendly user experience that I can provide to my own customers in this case. So in this very case over here, what will happen is that you see over here, we have sent out invite to the collaborators. That is, we have the human in the loop. So even though the AWS Agentic AI is an automatic tool that does or speed up 4 times what modernization simply is, or what some modernization simply does, it does not just do everything on its own. So you need humans in the loop who will want to validate what it is currently doing. So until the humans validate what it's currently doing, it does not just move on its own. So in certain cases that we will get to see within the workflow of this, we will see where the humans in the loop comes into play to just simply speed up the manual processes for modernization for which your current IT team go through in trying to deal with modernization. So at this very point, we have the invites that has been sent out. And then, like I made mention of, we need a connector. That connector has already been created, and then the connector has already been selected. And in my own case, I already have my source code seated within my GitHub repository for where I'm going to be pointing this connector to. So it's also possible that you might not also have the connector. You might also not have a GitHub repo. So what you simply do is that you can also be able to upload your source code into an AWS storage, and then the connector will be able to link up to where the AWS storage is, and then the transformation agent is going to make use of the source code that is seated within there. So I just want to encourage us, if you have any question, you can drop it within the chat or the comment area, and then we have a team of experts on the call who will attend to you. And we also have a Q&A session just after the demo where you can ask any question of your choice or choosing, so we provide clarity to you. So having selected the connector, we come down to this very area over here, which is the Discover resource for transformation. So what the Discover resource for transformation simply means, and then what it simply does is this: it goes into, in this case, perhaps maybe the GitHub repository where your source code is seated, And then with reference to what we're trying to do modernization for, in this case of mine, I'm trying to do a transformation for a .NET 4.8 to a .NET 8 version, a newer version. You get, so what it simply does is this. It does a discovery for anything that is related to .NET, anything that is outside the niche or the boundaries of a .NET. It does not pay heed to that. It does that, reviews that for you, and then it provides you a download area where you're able to download this. So like I made mention of, you have a human in the loop area where you review everything and validate everything that it is doing before you go to the other sessions or to the other areas. So it discovers all the repositories, all your project codes, everything that pertains to that. Like in my own case, this is the name of where my project code is seated on within my GitHub repository. So you're allowed to do the review for it. And when you have done all the review for it and you're fine with it, what you do is you validate the code, and then it begins to do an assessment for it. So for situations where you have layers and layers and layers of codes, and you're not really aware, or you're in the darkness as to what you currently do have with regards to your existing old source code or your existing critical business application code, this is where you make use of the access code. It does a deep dive and then looks at everything that you have. It creates documentations for you, so you can actually do stop at this area to look at everything that it has provided for you. So it creates documentations for you. It does dependency mappings for you so that you know which service is mapped to which service, which folder of your project has dependencies to which other folders. It does all the mappings for you, creates a pictorial diagram for that, and where you find all of this documentation is within the artifact layer for this, where you're allowed to download all of that for the assessment. And in my own case, I've done an assessment of what I currently do have, and then it currently has looked at what I have. I do not really have any dependencies. Supposing I have dependencies within my repository, what it will simply do is that it will create a pictorial representation for me so that I see in real time what I currently do have in my existing environment. So at this very point, it has looked at the old legacy application, and then it's saying I have one count, I have one project, and then these are the total lines of code that are seated within my project code. So this revelation is going to be made available to you, as compared to you just being in the dark, not knowing what you currently do have, and then locking yourself to a tribal knowledge developer who is just there maintaining your environment. So this provides you that room to be able to move away from that total dependency from a developer. So at this very point, where it begins to do a whole operation for transformation, you still go back to the human in the loop validation, where it shows you where all the dependency mappings and everything are. Haven't done all the assessment and everything that it has done. It's going to reveal to you the plan for how it is going to do, or for how it is going to carry out transformation. And in this case, it is going to look at all your codes. So normally it's possible that it might take you a lot of time. You have your developing team, or you have your IT team who are currently looking at your environment or your source code, and it might take them a lot of time. Developers have come, IT experts have come, and then they have gone. And then you currently have maybe a new team, and you want to carry out modernization. You want to carry out modernization of your old legacy or your old traditional application. So the thing is this: they have to do a thorough assessment, which will waste a lot of time. They have to do a whole dependency mapping. Aside from doing a whole dependency mapping, they also have to do a phasing of how the transformation or how the modernization is going to happen. So for that, this is where the AWS Transform also comes in to show them, or to reveal by nature of the plan for how it is going to carry out transformation. So it shows them the mapping for it based on maybe the critical nature for how certain areas are, which areas of the project are going to bring you quick wins, which areas of the project have lesser dependencies, which areas of the project have lesser critical critical problems attached to that. So it is going to phase it that way. And then the human in the loop comes in, they download this file over here. They download this file over here. For that, I have something like this. They download this file over here, and then you have an inventory revelation as to what it has, and then what it has shown you with respect to what you are trying to do transformation for. So it has looked at that, and then it is showing me currently that for the source code that I simply do have, this is what is compatible with the .NET 8. And then these are what are incompatible. And in this order, this is how it is going to carry out the transformation for this into it will look for the equivalent compatible versions for this that works with the newer modernized way of carrying out the modernization. So there are cases where you might want to do maybe a compliance audit and you need one part of the project to be executed much more quickly. So what you simply do is that you maybe check what you simply do is that you maybe check one project area or folder, and then you uncheck one other project area and folder. You rearrange it how you want it, how you want the phased modernization or modernization to be done. So these are part of the dividends or advantages that comes with the human in the loop. So even though automation or the time is going to be sped up, humans have to still be in the loop of all of these to steer the direction for which modernization is going to be done. And then finally, you have a review of everything that you want, and then you do the transformation. You are also going to be allowed to do a target for where you want the transformed version of your old legacy application or code to be stored in. So at this very point, like I made mention of, what I'm doing a target version for is a .NET, and then the target branch for this is going to be named this. I can also be able to edit this very version of that. So having shown that, you confirm validation for that, and then transformation is going to simply begin. The moment transformation is done and then transformation is completed, it is going to create a new target branch within your GitHub repository for what transformation has been done. So currently I have my legacy or my old traditional code that is monolithic that is seated down here, and then I currently have my more modern code that is seated within my GitHub repository existing side by side. So at this very point, the human in the loop can still come back and then do a comparison side by side with this to confirm that some of the business logic and then processes have been done correctly. And one thing I want to emphasize and make mention of is that AWS Transform agentic AI has been created in such a way that it maintains your business processes logic. It does not change. It. It only changes those incompatibilities that might not work in a cross-platform environment, but your business processes are going to be maintained. So this is the point where you might have your IT teams who comes in and then do a review of everything. They can also be able to download this newer code version into maybe a test environment or into maybe a trial environment, and then do a thorough regressive test and review to ensure that everything works correctly. So within the AWS environment, you have a dashboard area, you have a collaboration area, you have a work log area. The work log area simply shows you the output of everything that is being done in real time at this very point during the whole selection of what you do. And then the dashboard area simply shows you in a visual dashboard fashion what you currently do have. So as of this very point, I have one repository, I have one project, and then I do not have a unit test code. If I had a unit test code, it is going to do a unit test code that it is going to run the transformed code in order to ensure that the output or the results of this work correctly, just as my traditional or my old legacy application works. And then also one other advantages that you get with this is that during transformation, you do not necessarily have to be locked into this. You can leave this area and then transformation will be going on. The moment transformation is done, you will be emailed a review of everything that has been done within your AWS transformation. And you also have the privilege of looking at a summary of what has been done with respect to the transformation of your transformed old application. So what you see over here is just a transformation of everything that has been done. We have one project has been completely transformed. We have a new get package that has been added, what has been added, what has been removed. So we come down to this area, and then it shows us a project name for this, for what has been completely transformed. And then we see what has been removed, and then we see what has been added. It provides you that detailed summary. So you're able to move in and then have a thorough review of everything. So it saves you time. So what ideally might take developers or your developing team or your IT team years and years of time in order to see, in order to have light of, in order to have documentations for, in order to know what to do in terms of in order to know what to do in terms of priority, and then in terms of decisions that can stretch in time, it has reduced and then cut that down. So I have over here just a simple legacy application with respect to what I have over here. This old user experience for what I have over here in this legacy dependent web application that is seated within this Windows environment. And I have within also this other tab over here, the transformed application for this. These are existing side by side. So in a scenario where you have your modern application running that is all monolithic, you do not have to tamper with that. So you simply have an existing transformed application that exists side by side with this. So your users are currently using this. It does not affect where your source code is seated. It does not tamper with anything. Your users are simply using or having the normal experiences that they are currently having. And then you have this transformed environment over here. So it maintains all the business processes and everything that is being associated with this. You get, so that is what you see over here. That is what we simply downloaded from over here and then established from this. And then the other thing you're able to do is that you can be able to do a deployment in the sense that you can deploy this. Most of the outputs that come are cloud native outputs. So simply what happens is that you get to decide if you want to deploy your output or your transformed code into an AWS environment, or you rather remain maybe on your server. But as of this very point, what you can simply do is that you can do a unit test to confirm that what you simply have over here, the experience is correct, the output for your business process or logics are correct. So what we do is we transfer maybe 5% of the 100% traffic or users that you have over here to this very area over here. So over time, you notice, or there's a notice and observation that the 5% traffic that are over in this new experience that you have are not complaining or having any issue. What we simply do is that we do a gradual transfer of the users from this area to the point where you are allowed or you are able to decommission this whole environment, and then you maintain simply your new, more modernized application. So for the CTUs and then for the CTUs, you simply have moved away from the whole headache of the gamble of trying to do modernization in your old legacy application. And then in terms of scalability, some of the advantages that you experience in AWS in terms of scalabilities are that you have one monolithic application, you have a user experience, maybe you have, let's say, a customer management area, you have a customer payment gateway, you have some other services that are running. All of these initially were jam-packed in this area. But after transformation by the AWS Transform agent, what it simply does is that it's going to break down these services from monolithic to microservices. That is, your user management area is going to be existing as an independent service on its own. Your user payment gateway or user payment area is going to be existing as an independent area on its own. So it allows room for your developing team to come in and then add features to these independent services without the fear of what it was in the monolithic environment, where they try to add a new feature, and in trying to add a new feature to your old traditional environment, it might simply break down everything. So some of the dividends or the benefits that you get out of this is that you have driven down time for innovation. You have allowed yourself to be able to experience or move cross-platform. You are not tied with the whole nature of the whole vendor lock-in, where you get to be using maybe Windows. You are tied with the whole licensing thing, or you are stuck with VMware, where pricing is hiked, and then you're not able to move anywhere. You just deal with the whole pricing issue, and then you moved away from the whole tribal knowledge base that sits within one developer, where at this very point you have moved away from that. So you are not tied anymore to this whole dependency of not being able to move away from that. And then you also get to experience the utilization of also AWS services by deployments into the cloud, and then also innovations in terms of attaching new services or new features in terms of AI. AWS currently has a lot of AI features within it. So these are some of the benefits or some of the features that do comes with that. And also, if you get to containerize your application, because DevOps is actually the new way or the current IT trend to go. You want a quicker way of deployments by integrating CI/CD pipelines. You want a quicker way of deployment of your application packaged via containerization. Docker is also the way to go. You do not want to remain locked in or remain in one environment. So these are just some of the values that comes with that. Do drop your questions if you actually do have any question to ask. So at this very point, I will go back to the slide. I will go back to the slide and then try to wrap up. So can you please pull up the slide back, Tabitha? So if you have any question, you can drop your questions in the chat. If you have any question, you can drop your questions in the chat. If there's any area of clarity that you need, you can simply just let us know. So like I made mention of, thank you. So like I made mention of, can you loop in? So like I made mention of, just so that I wrap in and then we open the floor down for questioning and then for answers that we can and we should provide. Like I made mention of, so what you're just simply seeing is just a drive down in terms of time. So you're moving away from the whole time that comes with decision making, the whole time that comes with trying to discover, the whole time that comes with trying to phase how you want to do your modernization. You're driving down time from 18 to 24 months. And sometimes this can even get to 30 months in terms, because you have your teams who sometimes might be trying to make decisions and they might begin to argue on what to do and what not to do. So you have that driven down from 6 to 8 weeks. You have your cost driven down from 2 to 3 million down to sometimes 70% cost reduction. You are moved away from the whole licensing thing that comes with maybe Windows or VMware spiking costs, down to the utilization of maybe a Linux environment, and then a reduction in terms of the resources that has your workloads, that has to do with your workloads that are currently running. So you have a drive down in cost, and then you have a drive down in terms of failure rates. Rather than going through the route of a gamble, at this very point, you have simultaneously a lot of, you have five simultaneous AI agents that have already been trained on what to do that pertains to this domain expertise that has been provided to them, be it VMware, be it the .NET, also be it the mainframe environment. So you have this expertise that comes with parallel AI agents that work simultaneously, and then you have your human in the loop, that is your team, who come to validate what it is doing. So it speeds up their time while they drive the directions of that. You can go to the next slide. So aside from that, Tabitha, you can go to the next slide. So aside from that, I like to draw to your attention that the AWS Transform is a free service as of today. And the only things that you need in order to make use of the AWS transformation agent is that you only need an AWS account. There are no procurements attached to that. There are no licensing, and then there are no It's just simply pretty much a simply straightforward process. And then for your pilot support, what you can simply do is that you can look for a very simple, light, less critical application or code base that you have within your business process, and then you pick that up and then try to see how you can do modernization for that. You should simply have your result within 2 to 3 weeks, so that you can carry that and then show that to management, the result or the output for that. So currently, as of this very moment, we also have our methodologies, and then we also have our guidelines for how we guide implementations for this. So you can go to the next slide. So we also have our approaches and then our guidelines that we provide you with how you implement for this. So currently, as of this very moment, I know you might be thinking that this is pretty much a simple tool that you can begin to use. So where do we come into all of this? So where we come into all of this is that we are an AWS advanced tier partner. We provide you support during the whole transformation journey when you begin to do your modernization, where you move away from the whole legacy, from the old ways of how you deal with things to a much more modern way of doing things. So as an advanced tier partner, what we're able to do is that we're able to get quickly to you AWS's support in terms of your transformation, if there's any challenges that you might experience. And then we have years and years of expertise when it comes to replatforming, that is moving. No, you can stay at the other slide. We have years and years of expertise when it comes to do with migration, when it comes to do with disaster recovery, when it comes to do with setting up your resources or your workloads within the AWS environment. We come in and then we help you do the selections of the services that you might that you're supposed to do. We also come in to do a well-architected review for you. We also come in to try and then train your team, because it's possible that you might have your IT team might not really be aware of what the AWS environment is, and then what it is, and then what services to choose. So we come in and then we train them. And then we also come into, we have currently a DevOps team that will help to do with the whole containerization, the creation of your pipeline that helps push updates quickly of your application. And then we have solution expertise. We have solutions architect expertise, experts who can also help you to be able to add or include new features or expand to the utilization of other features and then services within the AWS environment. So for this, we currently do have all of these supports and then method guidelines that do actually guide us. So as of this very point, this brings me to the end of the demo. So if you have any question, this is the point where you're able to raise your questions and then we try to address them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mordecai and the Mano, for that insightful session. Thank you. And thank you to everyone that made time to join. So we are now in the question and answer session stage. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Although there was a question that really struck me, and I feel like I should just read it out. Maybe Mordecai would like to throw more light into that. And that was from Marceline. Please, I hope I'm not murdering your name. All right. So the question is that with the growing automation powered by Agent AI, what will be the evolving role of network and cybersecurity engineer in maintaining control, visibility, and compliance? Mordecai, do you want to shed more light into that question?
Right. Thank you. I think several answers have been posted, so I'll just summarize everything that has been said. So for Marceline, AWS is not here to take your job. AWS only wants to make your value more visible. All right. So like we said, AWS is not going to take the job away, but it's going to make your work easier. What AWS Transform seeks to do is to make things easy and faster for you. So you are no longer going to have to spend so much time troubleshooting a lot of things when you can simply allow AWS Transform to help you make your troubleshooting phase easier, and then you are able to focus on other things. You are not also stuck with just AWS. You have the liberty to also move around. So we are not here to take your job. AWS is not here to take your job, but to give more value to it as well. So you, as a network or security guy, you are able to control AWS Transform to do what you want the way it's supposed to be done for you. I don't know if you get me right.
That was a brilliant response, Mordecai. Thank you so much for shedding more light into that. So before we wrap up today's event, in quest to give our customers value and prospects, to help you accelerate how you operate in your environment and also achieve your long-term goals. So we are offering you, for every attendees in this event, we are offering you a free expert consultation. All our experts are on standby. As long as you are in this webinar, you have access to that. Also, we are offering a free legacy assessment to every attendees as well. And a form has been dropped, a link to fill has been dropped in the chat. Please kindly feel free to fill the form for the legacy assessment session. All right, thank you, everyone. So that brings us to the end of today's session, today's event. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Please feel free to follow us on our various social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course, LinkedIn. Thank you. I'm your moderator once again, Tabitha Okenwa. Thank you, everyone. And please, the chat is still open. We are still taking questions. Feel free to drop your question. And also, a link has been dropped in the chat. We want to hear from you. Please kindly feel that. Let's get your feedback and also how to serve you better. Thank you so much, everyone.